The story begins with our protagonist, Itami, an otaku. After a portal opened in his world, became a hero by saving countless lives from an attack. As it turns out, he was also a military member. After being promoted, he was sent with the self-defense forces to explore the portal that connected to another world, where, over time, he also became a hero by driving away a powerful dragon and saving many lives. With our protagonist, he and his comrades had arrived at Pina's mansion to talk with important people who would be gathering there. On the other side, in the Empire, the prince was being harsh with the leader of the warrior rabbits and was not at all kind to her, as he had her imprisoned, and she allowed herself to be treated like a toy because they had prisoners from her clan. The guy named Sorcel was Pina's brother, and when he learned that several senators would be meeting with the Japanese, he found it strange and headed to the location immediately. At the party, everything was going wonderfully as everyone loved the food prepared by the Japanese chefs. There was also a girl named Sherry who grew close to her guardian and told him that her cousin was rubbing her pearl necklace in her face and wanted him to solve the problem, even though he had nothing to do with it. He apologized for Sherry's boldness but asked them not to scold her and told her that if she behaved well, her parents would surely give her a gift, which left her smitten. And Pina noticed, even though her guardian didn't like that kind of joke. Meanwhile, when Itami showed the senators Japan's military power, they realized that if they became enemies with Japan, everyone would be doomed. So they were willing to hear Japan's terms for peace. However, the conversation was interrupted when Prince Sorcel arrived, so the senators were taken away to avoid being seen. When Sorcel arrived and spoke with Pina, she convinced him that they were just having a picnic and invited him to try the food. However, he was a real scoundrel. Since he loved the meat, he ended up taking it all, but when he left, the negotiation continued and Pina, upon hearing the indemnity they were asking for the damages to Japan, almost fainted, as they were demanding 500 million gold coins, and even all the coins in the empire didn't amount to that. She begged Itami to forgive her, even though that had only been the initial proposal, and the negotiation would depend on what stance the empire would take. However, when the emperor found out that the senators wanted to negotiate with Japan, he didn't plan to give Japan even one coin. On the other hand, in the lowest neighborhoods of the empire, where violence and pleasure dominated, several military personnel had arrived for a very noble reason, as they were there to treat and give medicine to the people in the area. At first, the bad guys in the area tried to attack them, but they massacred them and made that place the safest in the empire. As a result, several women came to them seeking refuge because they had a bad feeling, since in Japan it was normal for animals to be restless before a tragedy. The military knew there would be an earthquake, and Tammy also realized this, so he took everyone to a safe place. When the earthquake began, it caused great panic because that was something unknown in that world, although the Japanese were going about as if nothing were happening amid the earthquake since that wasn't so rare in Japan. Knowing that aftershocks would come, Pina got alarmed and wanted to accompany him to tell her father, although Itami wasn't sure about going to see the emperor because the conflict hadn't been resolved. But since Pina begged him to accompany her, he ended up agreeing. So when they arrived at the palace, the soldiers didn't even flinch at the earthquake. Later, when they arrived with the emperor, Pina introduced everyone and told him that the Japanese knew there would be another tremor. The emperor thanked the boys, and although they were enemies, he behaved appropriately, unlike his son, who came to warn him that the earth would tremble again, and he knew it because Noriko had told him. But it turns out that Noriko was a Japanese girl they had taken as a slave when they invaded Japan, and they treated her poorly. Tammy didn't hesitate to go rescue one of his own, so they rescued her immediately. Although Pina tried to calm things down, her brother went on the offensive, so Itami gave the order, and they started to eliminate the hostiles. As they discovered that they had more Japanese slaves and the prince was not willing to talk, Kurabayashi took charge of sending him off very poorly. But when Itami threatened him, surprisingly, the one who defended him was Tayol, the girl who had enslaved her. Later, when things calmed down, Sugawara made it clear that they didn't want conflicts but that there would be problems if they didn't hand over the Japanese people they had as prisoners, something the emperor didn't take seriously. As a warning, Japan destroyed the palace, and although there were no casualties, most of the senators wanted to go to war. However, Sorcel, after the beating, was calmer, so Pina was able to convince most that peace was the best option. Later, when Teo was watching over Sorcel, his brother named Diabo came to speak with him, and they had a brief chat about who would be the next emperor. But after the beating, Sorcel learned his lesson. Even though a Japanese prisoner had died in an accident, he planned to hand over the last Japanese slave he had left, and even lamented having treated Noriko so poorly, although Tu encouraged him by saying that having her as a personal slave prevented her from dying like the other Japanese slave. And if you're wondering why Tu was so nice to him after all he had done, well, she simply wasn't what she appeared to be. But I will tell you more about this later. Back with our group, when they returned to base, they immediately treated Noriko, and thanks to everyone's kindness, she felt a little better. But the one who wasn't doing well was Tuka, as her disorder had worsened, and she even confused Itami with her deceased father and refused to believe the girl's words that her father was dead. Lele had to put her to sleep, and they told Itami that Tuka worsened when Yao spoke to her. As he reminded her of the bad things that had happened, causing her to lose control, the boys went to talk. She had done it because she heard that Itami could defeat the dragon, and to force him to do so, she destabilized Tuka. The only cure for that disorder was for Tuka to see the dragon, and upon accepting reality, she would take revenge on the dragon. She was not proud of what she did, but she was desperate to save her people, so she was willing to give herself to him body and soul if he saved her people. On the other hand, when Diabo spoke with Pina, he learned that he would appoint Sorcel as the next emperor, something Diabo couldn't believe since Sorcel, unlike them, was not interested in peace because someone was likely controlling him, and that someone was Tyle. Yes, she had lowered the shadows, along with her subordinate, to manipulate things so that Sorcel would seize power to use it to attack Japan, and they would take care of destroying the entire empire. She did this out of revenge because she wanted them to pay for the empire suddenly destroying her clan and enslaving the survivors, so she wanted to take revenge at all costs. Back with our protagonist, seeing Tuka like that reminded him of his past when he lost his father, and his mother fell into depression. Then, when Tuka woke up, she still believed that Itami was her father, so, to keep her calm, Itami spent a lot of time with her, acting as her father, and she became so attached to him that she never left his side. Seriously, at no moment. But that would change since Itami received a mission to move to the capital to serve as an interpreter. When he wanted to tell Tuka about it, it was difficult for him because she was excited to stay with him, but when he told her, she did not like the idea. But since he would return after some time, she accepted, although she started having headaches. Later, when Itami met Yao, she knew about the headaches and realized that if they did nothing, Tuka would only get worse. Later, they held a party to say goodbye to Itami, and he would be more at ease since Tuka had also grown fond of Mari. Although he knew he couldn't continue pretending to be her father forever, so he sought help from experts, and Yao's solution, that Tuka take revenge, seemed to be the most efficient. Itami thought about it, but then he spoke with Adura, and if you don't remember, he was the old man who attacked the military base. But now he was in favor of peace and was at the base. They even gave him some prosthetics, so when Itami told him his problems, the old man advised him that despite the risks, he should let his heart guide him. But the next day, he also decided to say goodbye to Tuka to go on the mission he was assigned. However, in the middle of the takeoff, seeing Tuka like that, Itami decided to jump to stay with her. Of course, Yanagita scolded him for abandoning the mission and wanting to go kill the dragon when it would have been easier to complete the mission and then take the squad to finish off the dragon. But Itami did not intend to change his mind. Of course, Rory didn't want to be left out, so Itami asked her to accompany them, but as a payment, she made a contract with him, and if he died, his soul would belong to her. Additionally, Lele would also accompany them, and of course Yao, who already considered Itami as her owner, would also join them. Although Tuka didn't like him, they would all go together. On the other hand, when the boys left, it was a coincidence that Tiu would start provoking Japan. And for that, she planned to kill Noriko, the girl they had just rescued, using Delilah, the girl from her clan who had come to the city. But since Delilah hated her, she would not pay attention to her because she considered her a traitor for becoming a slave. That's why they sent a fake letter ordering Delilah to eliminate Noriko. Then, in the afternoon, after informing Noriko that they hadn't heard anything about her parents since the incident, she tried to communicate with them, but everything pointed to the fact that they had passed away. So, she didn't know if she really wanted to keep living. Delilah liked hearing that since she didn't like the idea of killing Noriko wouldn't resist, but she wanted it not to hurt, although she didn't know how to stab her without causing pain. Seeing Delilah like that reminded her of Tu, but at that moment Yanagita appeared, leading to a confrontation. Although she could stab him, he also managed to shoot her several times. After treating each other's wounds, the news spread quickly, and after an extensive investigation, they learned that the letter came from the noble family that our group had protected. The responsible party was this butler, and although he denied it, the fingerprints on the letter betrayed him. Following the events, they began to suspect that the one who caused all this was Prince Sorcel, so they would keep him under surveillance. In the Empire, several people from Japan were working as chefs, and when Sorcel arrived with the head chef, he almost attacked him in self-defense. But Sorcel had come to congratulate him on his cooking and wanted to hire him, which Tigul did not appreciate. In the air, when the dragon was out of its nest, the aircraft kept it under surveillance to gauge its strength, and it seemed they would not be able to bring it down. Back with our protagonist. When they arrived near Yao's village, dark elves began to appear, but when they clarified things, the dragon showed up, so both the elves and the boys had to face it. Emi wanted to take the opportunity to remind Tuka that the dragon had killed her father, and that she needed to take revenge. Tuka didn't want to accept it, but when she opened her eyes and shot, they managed to, scaring away the dragon. Shortly afterward, when the boys were camping, the elves arrived, and they spoke about the dragon that had been sleeping in the mountains, which had awakened 50 years earlier. If they didn't do anything, it would end the elves, so they needed their help and would send their best warriors with them to defeat the dragon. So the next day, Itami taught them how to use weapons for combat, and to prevent Tuka from getting out of control, they carried her asleep the entire way. When they arrived at the mountain and confirmed that the dragon was not there, they left Rory on watch because she was afraid to enter underground. By the grace of the goddess Hati, the boys ventured into the cave, and upon reaching the dragon's nest, they placed bombs throughout the nest to blow it up. However, the dragon arrived sooner than expected, and since they were underground, communication didn't work, which left the elves vulnerable. The elves fought the dragon with everything they had, but little by little, the dragon defeated them. When Tuka woke up and saw what was happening, she remembered what happened to her village and blamed herself for her father's death. But the law clarified that the only guilty one was the dragon. If she wanted to honor her father's death, they would have to defeat the dragon. Later, when Itami reacted and wanted to detonate the bomb, it had become disconnected. While he fixed it, Lele used her magic to buy time by throwing the area's swords at the dragon. When she fainted, the boys would take her out of there. Although Crow sacrificed himself to buy time, the boys wouldn't succeed. That's when Tuka gathered her courage and cast her magic so that a lightning bolt would strike the dragon. Upon impact, the bomb also activated, and they ended up defeating the dragon. Even though there was a collapse, the boys managed to escape the cave. Outside, Rory was badly injured, and the culprit was a demigoddess named Giselle, who had been sent by the goddess Hati to take Rory away. 8 was also surprised that Giselle had defeated Rory because Rory was supposed to be the strongest apostle. However, Giselle could only win because Rory had taken all the damage that Itami had received against the dragon, as the contract she made with him was not to obtain his soul but to take damage for him. Giselle didn't care about their relationship and would tie them up along with the dragon's offspring since she had awakened the dragon 50 years earlier to breed and obtain its offspring. However, Rory wasn't afraid because the man who defeated the dragon was by her side. When the fight began, Itami took Rory out of there, and they started to escape. Fortunately, the aircraft monitoring the dragon passed by, and upon seeing the boys in danger, they didn't hesitate to eliminate the dragons. Giselle had no choice but to flee, and in the end, everything turned out well. To Itami's surprise, when he returned to base, he didn't receive any reprimands but was instead honored for saving the kidnapped girl. He also received a noble title from Duran, who turned out to be the king of the elven country. For that reason, the plains were authorized to enter the country to help them, and from the dark elves, he received a very valuable stone they possessed. But the most important thing was that Itami was given the mission to investigate the natural resources, granting him authorization to go anywhere. After teaching the girls to drive, they ended up going to the city of Rondell, where Lele would take her exam to obtain a master's degree as a sorceress. Upon arriving at an inn, since they were with Rory, they would receive the best service. In contrast, Itami was confused with a servant and was lodged in a storage room. Later, when the boys went to register Lele, they were received by the great Mimosa, who already knew Lele and was happy to see her, although the boys quickly realized she was somewhat clumsy. Then this girl named Arpeggio appeared, who turned out to be Lele's older sister. While she didn't show the affection she had for her, she displayed envy for all of Lele's achievements. On the other hand, in the Empire, those from Japan sent the dragon's head as a gift. Additionally, dialogues between countries would soon begin. However, to Sugawara's surprise, Sherry couldn't take her eyes off him. When Sugawara's companion understood what was happening, she looked at him unfavorably. Sorol was the only one who disagreed with the meeting but could do nothing. When the meeting began, he was disrespectful, and the first thing he did was greet his subordinates who had returned to Japan. Even so, the meeting continued, and when they presented the dragon's head to Emperor Pina, she told him that Itami and his group had defeated it. The only person she wanted to invite and give credit to was Lele, as she was the only human in the group and belonged to the Empire. However, the Japanese didn't care, so the ceremony would proceed. But when they toasted, the emperor ended up being poisoned, and the responsible party was Tyol. This situation was convenient for Sorol, as with his father resting, he became the new emperor and would lead everyone to war. Pina wanted to convince him not to do anything foolish, but now that he had his subordinates inflating his ego, he wasn't thinking of backing down. Additionally, Diabo, not being named emperor, decided not to get involved with the empire. On the other hand, when Lele told them how wonderful Japan was because all the books were cheap and available to everyone, Arpeggio got upset since she dedicated herself to translating books. If Japan started to sell books, She would be out of a job, however. For that to happen, it would take many years. By the way, I hadn't mentioned it, but Myosa also knew Rory since when she was a child. Rory entrusted her to discover the truth of the world. In that world, all races, although unaware of their origins, considered Alnus their homeland because all races had come from other worlds through the portal. Once they crossed the portal, it would enter a period of inactivity and would reopen after many years. Rory congratulated her on reaching that conclusion. Later, when Lele showed her Japanese technology, Arpeggio knew she couldn't compete against Lele, so she planned to become a housewife. She wanted to know if Itami was a good match, and since he was a military man with a good rank in both worlds and technically a millionaire because of the crystal and also single, he was a great catch, but Lele clarified that he wasn't single, which surprised everyone. He said it was because they had completed the 3-night ceremony, which consisted of sleeping 3 times with the same person to be married, although if that was the case, Batuka had already slept with Itami more times, which only made Rory angrier, but the most upset was Arp. Seeing that she had lost to Lele in magic, intellect, and love, she challenged Lele to a duel. At first, the girls were evenly matched, as both dominated superb magic, resulting in a tie, but out of nowhere, a guy appeared to finish off Lele. Fortunately, a knight named Pina ended up saving her. It turned out that Lele had been attacked because she gained fame in the capital for killing the dragon, and someone was envious of her, but believe it or not, Sorcel didn't give the order since now that he was emperor, Tile was second in command and was giving twisted orders outright. One of those orders was to attack important people who were in favor of peace. Thanks to Sherry's parents, she and a guy named Cell managed to escape, although her parents ended up dying. Once Sherry calmed down, thanks to her ingenuity, she was able to secure food and shelter without being caught. They even managed to seek refuge with the Order of Pina, which protected the Japanese. For that reason, entry was prohibited for all people who were not from Japan. So when Sherry spoke with the girls, she wanted them to allow her to talk to her Guagara, as she claimed that one day he would be her husband. However, when they informed her Guagara of what had happened, he couldn't do anything because his country didn't give the order, and if he let Sherry and Castle, who were important people, in, chaos would ensue with the Empire. Jerry wanted to at least talk to him since her life was in danger, but her Gawara was unsure of what to do. Moreover, when her pursuers arrived, since they came from the Empire, they had the right to take Cell and Sherry, but Sugawara stepped out to defend them, telling them that one day she would be his wife. The guys didn't plan on leaving empty-handed, but since the Order of Pina had orders to protect them, they had a fierce and long confrontation. Meanwhile, many things were happening. Noriko had become a reporter. Commanders from various countries had arrived in that world, while the Japanese military prevented them from obtaining valuable information from that world by running out of money. Furthermore, those who tried to assassinate Ellen hadn't given up, so they devised a plan. At night, when they attacked, they ended up capturing the dwarves who worked at the inn, but they were somewhat innocent since a guy known as the Piper tricked them into believing that Itami's group were imposters who had a bounty. The boys forgave the goblins but sent a girl named Shandy to watch over them. There, she discovered the person who probably wanted to eliminate Lele, but the strange thing was that she asked the goblins to tell Lele to wear armor for protection, so when Lele would present her theory for her master's degree, an old woman tried to kill her out of jealousy. But she was well protected. By the way, in the test where the wizards presented their theories, if they failed, they would be covered in paint. When it was Lele's turn, the woman from before tried to finish her off but was easily stopped, as the wizards knew they would try to kill Lele. But when everyone let their guard down, the one who really wanted to kill Lele appeared. Fortunately, she was wearing armor that protected her. Later, when they spoke with Shandy, she acted offended because they hadn't told her that Lele would wear armor, even though she was the first person to hear the idea about the armor. Yes, the girl was somewhat foolish, but when interrogated, it turned out that she tried to kill Lele to save Princess Pina. Since Sorcel wanted Lele dead, she intended to bring her head to show Pina's loyalty and thus save her. It turned out that Pina was taken prisoner overnight for supposed treason, and who had instilled that idea in Sorcel was Tio. Without her and with all the conflicts they were facing, it was inevitable that the High Command of Japan would remain with their arms crossed. That's when they gave the order and sent heavy artillery to the Empire, quickly destroying their defenses and invading the palace. Sorcel could only think of escaping, but Tile told her she couldn't do that, otherwise the Empire would fall. On the other hand, Itami's squad focused on putting up a fight, saving the civilians while Itami and the girls arrived at the scene. Additionally, when the order from Pina came, the military arrived to help save both the girls and the people they were protecting. That's why Colonel Keenan would take everyone in the planes. Polissa thanked him for his help, but she intended to stay behind to save the princess, leaving a girl named Katie in charge. However, as Polissa headed towards her death, Katie decided to follow her. When they reached the city, They were not allowed to pass, and her horse was knocked down, leading Katie to rescue her. Fortunately, the military was waiting for them, and when the horse was taken down, the soldiers captured the girls. Colonel Keenan ordered a retreat, allowing them to escape without problems, and he ultimately won Katie's heart. But Polisa was frustrated because they couldn't go save Princess Sorcel, who was also frustrated as all the important people had been taken. But Tiu was calm because she knew the military would return to rescue the most important person to achieve peace, which was Pina, and she was right since our group would handle that mission. Luckily, they had already devised a plan beforehand, which was for Atami to pretend to be a servant. When they arrived, as Sorcel supposedly wanted to speak with Lele, they were allowed to pass without problems, while Atami would have to pull the truck by himself. On the other hand, inside the palace, Pina was being judged for supposed treason for trying to make peace with Japan. Despite everything that happened, Sorcel still believed she could defeat Japan. But at that moment, the guys arrived to save Pina. Since Atami warned them that they couldn't handle Rory, the soldiers were smart and did nothing, unlike Sorcel, who called upon her secret weapon, a giant ogre. However, Lele and Rory were able to defeat it without issues, thereby saving Pina. Sorcel still wanted to fight, but Atami warned her not to mess with any of the girls again, and the next bullet would go straight to her head. The guys managed to exit the palace successfully, and the rest of the team completed the other important mission, which was to extract the emperor from there. Although the army wouldn't let them leave so easily, fortunately reinforcements were waiting for them, and thanks to them, they could escape without issues. When Atami was telling Pina that everyone was safe, Pina's father woke up, and with him conscious, Pina asked him to return to power to stop Sorcel. But he had a better idea, which was to follow Japan's plan and name Pina as the heir princess to put an end to the war and lead the empire toward peace. On the other hand, after the defeat, Sorcel decided to escape, but the Japanese would keep him under surveillance. Tiu, although she couldn't complete her revenge for all the bad things done to her, and her people couldn't stop crying for all the wrongs she had committed. Sometime later, the succession ceremony began, where everyone attended, and the emperor named Pina as the heir princess. They also had several surprises, as these two had been dating for a while, and Polisa, despite being noble, appeared to be Latin. As in the few dates she had with Tomita, she was already pregnant. Additionally, Colonel Kengu-katen, although they didn't understand each other, planned to overcome the language barrier and cultivate their love. These two had become very close. After almost killing each other, and the last surprise, which wasn't much of a surprise, was the most controversial romance of all. Everyone was surprised by what was happening, but Kurabayashi noticed that he hadn't seen Atami. After a year, Atami had arrived in Japan for his long-awaited annual Dogi event, and this time, nothing could ruin his moment. Nothing except the girls who had followed him because they wanted to accompany him. He wanted them to return to the portal, but as they were famous, a crowd formed, and for their sake, the security ended up removing them from there. Risa, who was going to the event, didn't know what trouble she had gotten into this time, but the poor protagonist just wanted to buy his favorite dogis.